Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us again for another edition of Getting Answers. My name is Derek Duncan, and I'm the lead pastor here at Chapel of the Cross in Westboro, Massachusetts. If you don't know where that is, right outside of Boston. The purpose of this show really is to provide answers to anything that you have questions about. It's your show. We want to help you understand about God, about the Bible, about Christianity, all those kinds of things. Anything personal that we can encourage you with in terms of God's perspective on different issues. We're here to help. And today I thought we'd start off, first of all, by just saying hello to Jillian again.
Hi, guys.
It's always good to have you.
Good to have you too, Pastor Derek.
So I was going to start with a little bit of perspective about change, but I think I'll start with you. You're familiar with change, and
Yes.
You've been through it quite a bit. So when you made the decision to come here, that was a huge change. You were in the teaching field, and how did you kind of cope with that or figure that out as you went along?
Sure. So, it was actually 2 years ago. I was just starting off another school year, my 10th year of teaching. And, I don't know if it's something about like that big number of 10 years. And I'm actually a person that thrives on change. My husband doesn't understand it.
Sure.
Very few people do, but I don't mind change. But it was starting to be a tough school year, and just teaching high school English as a second language is hard at times. But anyways, I was just starting off the school year, and the secretary, the former administrative assistant here, reached out to me as a friend, or we ended up chatting, and she brought up this job that was listed. And it wasn't on my radar to, like, when you start a school year, you don't ever think about leaving a school year. So I thanked her for the opportunity, but I didn't really think it was going to amount to anything. And but there was still something pulling at me that was like, you know what, though, just check it out. Like, you don't have to jump in. You don't have to, maybe it's not for you, but just read the job description. So I read the job description, and then I was like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. I've always wanted to be a worship leader. I've always wanted to use my gifts in music and connecting with people, and I've always wanted to minister to people too and tell people about God. So I was interested, and then I just checked out the church. And then you and I had like a series of conversations about what it might look like and if it would even be a fit or not. And it was kind of like, I'm talking to you now almost like we were talking back then.
Yeah.
But I wasn't expecting to leave teaching, but the way it all worked out was great. And so that whole year, we continued the conversation. I came in and led a few times and just got to know some of the members here at the church and on the worship team. And it was just such a great fit. And a big thing about it was that, like, my husband doesn't come from a super strong church background. So at the very beginning, like, I just held the idea really loosely and like, hey, Sean, this probably won't work out, but can we like look at it? And that was one of the first times in our marriage that we really kind of approached it in a similar kind of way, like in an open-minded but conservative kind of way, and made that decision together. So after many, many months, all the things that needed to work out did work out. I was going up on a school year where my twins would be in part-time preschool and trying to figure out, how can I be at work at 7 a.m. and then be back at 3 and get my kids on and off the bus. It was logistically, I didn't know how I could keep doing my job at the school and be a mom. And so I really needed to have flexibility, and I needed to be able to, be there more for my kids. And coming here really provided me with that. And so.
Yeah, sometimes when I think about change, sometimes it's change that we initiate, and sometimes it's change that sort of initiates us, or like falls on us that we're not expecting.
Yeah.
And both of them have a similar feel. It takes discernment. It takes courage to not panic right away if it's something thrown on you. Like I read this morning that 860,000 Americans applied for unemployment just this week alone. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that are up and down, and it can be a roller coaster. You don't always know what you should be doing. But I think one of the things that I like what you said is with you and Sean, you held it loosely. So I think part of the change management process, I guess you could say, is Don't be afraid to explore things, but then don't demand kind of or get false expectations that something's going to happen, because God might have other plans.
Right.
One of the things in the Bible where Jeremiah the prophet, he's an Old Testament prophet, what he says is a man's life is not his own. It's directed by the Lord. And so we just need to hold things loosely. It's, there's never anything wrong with exploring new opportunities, but just make sure your emotions and expectations don't get ahead of what's really happening.
Yeah. So I can remember I'm not naturally a super patient, like long-term project kind of person. What really energizes me, like even when I was working in the public school system, there were different committees that you could participate with, and there were the professional development groups were great for me, because you'd say, okay, we have a professional development day coming up in a month. Let's get like 5 people together and we'll brainstorm some sessions that will be super meaningful for teachers. And so for that 5 weeks, we'd work together, and then I would put together presentations, or I would say, okay, well, why don't we make this video or whatever, and I could go in and just like get it done, and that would be super energizing. And then there was one year where someone invited me to be on this NEASC committee, which is basically like an accreditation type group that either in your school district you put together all the proof that you're doing all these things, or you go into another building, another district, and evaluate them and see if they're checking all the boxes and stuff like that. And when someone asked me to be a part of it, I had no idea. It was like a 2-year commitment, and like lots of meetings, lots of attention to detail. And so I started off and I was like super excited, and then I realized what it was, and I passed the buck because it wasn't in my skill set, and it certainly would have drained me. I say all that to say that the process when I came here was really from September is when I first thought about it. And I think we made the decision in like April, and then I started working in August. And like that I'm 36. You would think I would be like more mature and but there's certain areas of my life I've just like haven't grown in the way I maybe should have. But like that was a really awesome opportunity for me to not get compulsive, not get impatient, not jump on board or say, you know what, a decision needs to be made now, or I need to know how much I'm going to make, or there were a ton of questions in my mind and in Sean's mind, and probably in your mind too, with in terms of you went a long time without having a worship leader, to then hiring someone that's like a different type of a person and background in that role. And so anyways, I say all that to say that it was the healthiest long-term decision making I've ever made, and I really feel like that's been a huge gift to me, and to see how faithful God was through that, and to see how healthy it was for me and Sean to go through. And I mean, he just really respects you. He respects the church, and it was a decision, a big deal decision that we made together, and I'll just forever be thankful for that.
Yeah, you hit on some things I think are really important, because sometimes we don't take time in the change process to really let God speak to our hearts in terms of why this is happening, or why especially if we're instituting that change.
Yeah.
Because many of us, we short circuit what God's doing a little bit too quickly. Call me crazy, I don't like jobs that aren't fun or hard or aren't necessarily my strength, like you were talking about. But sometimes God wants to teach you something in that process, and so you have to just breathe and let Him speak to you, and then make sure your motives are right for change. You know, because you can be running away from something, or you could be moving too quickly and it's not in God's timing, or things like that. And there's things that He wants to teach you along the way. I'll give you a quick example. My very first church job was at a church in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and I was the single adult minister. And I was really excited about it because there was a lot of young professionals living in Oklahoma, and I thought, man, this is great. So college and young professionals, this is going to be great. Well, when I got there, I realized that the age of the church and the location of the church, my ministry was primarily going to be to single, again, adults.
Oh, okay.
So adults that have great value and worth in God's eyes, but they'd been divorced and stuff like that, and they'd been hurt and stuff. And so it really didn't fit my expectation of what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Instead of doing some fun kayaking trip or something like that, we were playing chicken foot dominoes in in a room in the
Chicken
church.
foot domino.
It's
What
a
is
domino
that?
game called Chicken Foot where you arrange the dominoes. Anyway, smart people know about it. I'm sorry that you don't quite understand it, but we used to play these. We used to play these dominoes game, and my biggest job was getting Earl to not quit hitting on Esther, and listen to the Bible study versus because they were lonely and they wanted relationships. Anyway,
Yeah.
I asked God to give me another job, and one of the things that happened was He said no,
Oh.
and the reason He said no is because I felt like I wasn't much of a servant, and I really wasn't loving people for their value. I was just kind of in ministry to feel good about myself or do what I wanted to do. And through that process, I stayed, for another year and a half, and God really taught me to sacrificially love people. He taught me to be more of a servant and honoring and not so judgmental about people and not so self-focused about my ministry job. So sometimes change means sticking around and
Yeah.
listening to what God's doing, but other times change means stepping out in faith.
Yeah.
And it's all different, but if you allow God to speak to your heart, and if you're interested in hearing from Him in the midst of it, He can really use it to touch you. So that's one of my experiences, and carry the journey on just a little bit for me because you said you were short-term projects and
Yeah.
lots of freedom and and those kinds of things. I would add in their attention span and stuff like that too. So
Sure.
you make this big change and it's awesome, and then a year in you change again, to my surprise. And so help us understand that a little bit and kind of
I'm gonna blush.
kind of what happened in that journey. So you're
Yeah.
no longer the worship arts director, or a few more days.
Yeah.
And then you're transitioning back to being a mom and those kinds of things. But talk about that particular change.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're joining us and you haven't heard, Derek just ever so graciously explained that as of this next Sunday will be my last formal Sunday leading worship under the role of director of worship and arts.
Yeah.
So yeah, when the coronavirus came, there was certainly just so much change that happened in our family. Obviously, everybody went through that, and there were moments there where wait, let me back up. So this past year, I've been serving full time in ministry. And then I've kept a part-time position for the public school system, which kind of gave us that security of, in terms of if I fully left and retired from teaching, then you kind of lose your foot in the door in case whatever.
Yeah.
But I kept that role, that part-time, once a week job. So when the coronavirus happened and we were quarantined, and my kid, the online learning with my 4 kids. And last year it was 4th grade, kindergarten, and the twins were in preschool, and so preschool was not too hard, but it kind of forced me to juggle a whole lot. And at the beginning, I was spending many hours doing video editing, and not just for the church, but for the school system as well. And it was a lot, but we got through it, but when we started to meet in person again, and when I had the summer to kind of be with my kids more, we even went on a family vacation. It kind of the times that I was with the kids more and able to kind of clock in and clock out and be home with them became really clear that my kids needed more of me. And there's differences I've found after a year in ministry between teaching full time and ministry full-time. And so from some real practical ways, because I had taught for so long, I could show up at work at 7 and the students would leave at 2, and then I'd have an hour, and I gave myself an hour and a half every day afterwards to do grading, to prep for the next day and all of that. And I knew my craft well enough, so I could just so I was working Monday through Friday, clocking in, clocking out, 7 to 3:30. And so it was easier in terms of being home more and not bringing work at home.
Sure.
But during this time, there's, in terms of working in ministry, I think that there's more of a need for me to, obviously I'm working on Sundays, and which is not bad. I would be volunteering anyway, but there's a different kind of level of responsibility.
Sure.
And then needing to provide like the things I really want to do in this role, in terms of connecting with people and training people and mentoring people and like almost serving in kind of a, not a counselor way, but more connecting more with people. I'm emotionally and sometimes physically drained from how much my kids need. And I'm not going to say my husband, because he's just amazing. He doesn't need anything from me.
He's perfect. Hey, Sean.
Hi, Sean.
I'm rooting for you. I'm praying for you too. Sorry.
Poor Jonathan. I gotta tell you something later, but so I don't know. I think like the there was some talk. You and I had talks a long time ago about being all in, and me just realizing like I couldn't be. I can't be.
Yeah.
And even though I'll still be a working mom and, working on, still doing work for part-time for the school system, and I do some video editing and stuff like that, I need to be able to be more present on the weekends, and I need to be able to take Lizzie to her midweek dance classes, and I just need to be more available to my family. And so I couldn't find a way to do it all. And I spent more than just thinking about it and being like, oh, making lists and how can I juggle it all? And what if I do this? What if I work a double here? And blah, blah, blah. I have a great group of ladies I meet with on a weekly basis that I always talk about them, my Duncan girls, although we don't meet at Duncan's anymore. But they've been just a great sounding board as well to talk through all of it, and to talk about, oh, this is stressing me out, or I feel too much pressure here. And even though there's no pressure, I feel it because I value the role, I value what needs to be done, and then I can't be there, so.
Yeah, again, you're hitting on some really good things, that why I think change is primarily a good thing that God uses to teach us things that we wouldn't know, versus something that we need to be afraid of.
Yeah.
Because in the process of having the courage to enter into ministry, you got to sort of feel what that's like and have God use you in that role, but then you were still holding it loosely and trying to listen to God in the process. And in that process, no one expected the pandemic. No one expected that you'd be teaching your kids at home and these hybrid models and craziness and those kinds of things. And so this thing happened, and you were still listening, and God spoke to you about how important your kiddos are, and they need your attention and those kinds of things. And so somehow, if you can hold things loosely, no matter what you're doing, what job you're doing, what career you have, those kinds of things, it gives God a better opportunity to speak and teach you things about yourself and understand, why is this change happening and what are you trying to show me, Lord? Corrie ten Boom is a lady that I really respect, and she wrote a book called The Hiding Place, one of the best books I've ever read. You might want to check it out. She survived the Holocaust, survived all the Nazi imprisonment and camps and those kinds of things. And this book is a wonderful book about faith and about forgiveness and those kinds of things. But she has an illustration in there where she says, it's better to go to God with an open hand and receive what he has for you, because she says the other way, it hurts too much to have God pry your fingers apart to get at your life. And so I love that trust. God, I don't necessarily want to do this, but I trust you. My hand is open. And if you have that posture in life, God can really, really speak to you and help you understand more about who you are, what you need to focus on in terms of priorities, those kinds of things. It's good.
I struggled a lot with the decision because I couldn't. Well, luckily, like you and I have always just had such a great relationship in terms of being able to talk things through and brainstorm. And you've seen me on good days, on bad days, on frazzled days, which are maybe more often the case.
I'm a good boss.
You're the best. You're the best. And so humble.
Oh, yeah. That's me.
Yeah. Wow. You're the best. No, you are the best, though. But it was hard because there were times where I legitimately was like, maybe this is God testing me and asking me to be all in here and let go of the school job and let go of my, my side gigs with video editing. Like there were many times where I was like, am I missing it here? And some of those times I remember you were preaching about being all in, and I had this talk with Josh, who's the student director here at Chapel. After I had made the decision to go ahead and step down, I was talking to Josh about it, and I have personally, I have this broken relationship with my mom, and I was talking to Josh, and I was like, yeah, the thing is, like, I really do want to be a good mom. Like, I don't want to be short-tempered with my kids. I want to have enough energy to not flip out about little things or dismiss them because I'm too busy. And it was kind of at that moment where I broke down, even worse than I'm breaking down now, where I was like, okay, I'm in walking away from this ministry job. I'm feel like I'm choosing to be all in on my family. Again, though I'll still be working. I feel like I keep saying that because, like, I don't want people to be like, wait, you said you were leaving the church so you could be a mom full time. Let me be clear. I'm also still working, but it's work that's manageable and much less hours, and I can control my my time and work from home.
Yeah, it was the full-time aspect of it, and working on weekends and
nights.
Plus, with Sean's schedule at work, he has a pretty rigid schedule. He works in the prisons
right.
and stuff, and so yeah, you needed an environment that was just a little bit more, give you more freedom.
Right.
And honestly, don't ever let anybody or the evil one whisper in your ear that you didn't do a good job or you failed or you weren't all in from a spiritual standpoint, because by far your relationship with God and then your family is much more important than what we're doing here. And you're totally making the right decision. I mean, I resent it. I don't appreciate you leaving me, but I totally get it, and I totally support it. And to me, that's where, again, that holding things loosely.
Yeah.
I had dreams, I had plans, I had things that we were going to do, and funny enough, Getting Answers wasn't even on my radar stream, and now we started this, and this is something that we can continue, and it's great. It's what God wants is better than what we want, but sometimes it's hard to trust Him in those things. So I appreciate you a lot.
Thanks. I appreciate you too.
Sure. So I thought maybe I could wrap up just a couple of summary statements to have you remember that change can be a good thing, that God can speak to you. One is just remind yourself that your life is not your own. You belong to your Creator. He created you. He created the world. He kind of has the right to tell you what to do, and put on top of that, He gave us this free will gift, this autonomy of the soul, where we can make our own decisions, and sometimes we make bad ones, and that's where sin and heartache and stuff like that comes in. And so, because the world is broken and so are we, sometimes things change for you that you don't really want to have happen. But if you have a higher view of who God is versus your circumstances, He can really speak to you and teach you more about yourself and get you into perhaps a better situation than you're in. Many of us are too afraid to step out in faith and change, and we need to not be so afraid. One of the harder parts about my job is with congregation people and with staff people and those kinds of things. Sometimes I have to lead people and shepherd people through change that they don't exactly want to do or go through.
Yeah.
But that's how you really love people. If you're my friend and you decided that you don't like Sean anymore and you're going to leave your marriage, I would lovingly shepherd you and lead you through that. That's a huge mistake, and let me help. Don't give up yet or whatever. And so that might not be an enjoyable conversation, and sometimes they aren't. But I think we need to love each other enough to speak the truth and to help people go through what they need to be where God wants them to be. So God's sort of in charge, and so don't worry about change too much. I also want to reassure you too. Also, the prophet Jeremiah says something pretty cool in Jeremiah 29:11. You might know this verse.
Jeremiah 29:11.
Says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord." He's speaking to the nation of Israel. "I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." And so God knows exactly what's going on. He's not up in heaven, wringing his hands and saying, "Oh no, this pandemic, and oh no, poor Jillian, what are we going to do? How am I going to help her?" He's got it all figured out. Now, that doesn't mean, just don't mishear me, that doesn't mean that everything's going to be great all the time. you're always going to have lots of money, a great job, health, all that kind of stuff. God doesn't promise you that kind of guarantee, but he says, I do have plans and I'm with you and I want to give you hope and I want to give you a future. And that shows the intentions of God. I don't know why I grew up with the idea of God being mad at me a lot, and like he was just angry and disappointed that I wasn't doing the right things. And that's just a misperception. I don't know where it came from, but he isn't angry. In fact, he's loving and kind and perfect. And he has a judgmental wrath side, but that's also perfect. Like my anger side or my discipline side, I might just be mad and taking it out on my kids or something like that. God doesn't take things out indiscriminately. I mean, he just knows what he's doing. And so I would just encourage you with that he's in charge and he does love you, and the things that he allows in your life are for your benefit, to teach you, to increase your faith, to help you have more peace, at work, all those kinds of things. It's when we hold on to our own insecurity and try to do something on our own strength, that's where it messes up. In fact, that reminds me, let me find this other verse here in Jeremiah.
While you do that, Elise, my cousin who joined us last week, who remember, she was super excited, it was exactly what she needed to hear.
Yeah.
So she's made a few comments. She said, "We're always afraid we're going to let someone down. Love you, Jill." Thanks. She gets my the fear and I don't want to do something wrong. I don't want people to be mad at me. And then she wrote, to empower each other to be the person God calls us to be. Going along with what you said, where it's not always easy to have those conversations, but we want to empower and encourage each other to be the person that God calls us to be. And
absolutely. Yeah, this one verse that I wanted to read, it sort of summarizes how I've got myself in trouble in these areas a little bit before about changing and those kinds of things. Jeremiah says, the prophet again says, "Let not the wise man boast of his wisdom, or the strong man boast of his strength, or the rich man boast of his riches. But let him who boasts boast about this, that he understands and knows me, that I am the Lord, who exercises kindness, justice, righteousness on earth, for in these I delight." So part of where we get messed up in our journey of life and change and jobs and families, everything, is we try to do stuff on our own, or we trust in things that we're not supposed to trust in to give us security and peace. The biggest blessing in life, and sometimes this comes through hard change, is discovering that your most valued possession is God himself and his love for you. And that's what we should be most excited about, not exactly what we're doing from an employment standpoint or where we live or whatever. Make sense?
It does make sense. But for someone that doesn't get okay, so I get my enjoyment and my joy, or not enjoyment, but my joy and my peace from God. Can you break that down for someone that might not have any idea what you're talking about, and how is it that you can trust in God, and can you just break that down as a pastor, Christianity 101?
Right. Well,
God.
one of the easiest ways probably to explain it is there's different things to depend upon or trust in to get through life. We're wired as relational beings, and we need people, we need each other to make it through life. So I could put my trust in my spouse or my boyfriend or girlfriend to be my source of joy and direction, but I wouldn't totally recommend it. I mean, you want to trust them some, but they're broken people and they're going to make mistakes and their motives are not always going to be true. So what I'm looking for is, what can I put my trust in that's never going to change and is going to be completely objective and justice oriented, and he's going to love me no matter what. And that's that relationship with Jesus. He lived on earth and lived in our skin and knows what it's like to worry and fear and doubt and that kind of stuff. He overcame all that because he knew that we couldn't. And then he gave us that gift of forgiveness for our wrong sins, our things that we have done wrong, by his death on the cross. And so we have a Savior that lived in this humanity mess that we're in, and overcame it, and he wants to help us overcome it too. So when I say trust in God or get your joy from God, I'm trying to evaluate, is there anything in my life that's more important than Jesus? And so I'm not saying you got to go to church 24/7, you're all holy all the time, and you don't watch movies anymore because the devil's in the movies or what. I mean, I'm not trying to be weird. I'm just trying to be honest. And so you can evaluate your life, like what's the most important thing in your life. And if it's your spouse, I would commend you and say that's good, but that's not enough because your spouse might let you down. Is it your job? Well, holy cow, with all the unemployment and COVID and stuff like that, I certainly wouldn't put it in your job. Is it our government? Don't get me started. we can't, our government's not supposed to be our savior and those kinds of things. And is it money? I mean, I've lived long enough where I've made money, I've lost money, I've made good decisions, bad decisions, and it's just so fickle. It's like sand that goes through your fingers. It's not something to count on.
Definitely not your vehicles either.
Right. Go through cars, tires.
I've never heard of one person having so many issues with
My
cars.
kids, I love my kids, but between pop tires and wrecked cars and...
You sound like my dad. My dad's always owned his own business ever since I was born. And man, he must pay so much money for car insurance because my sister's wrecked a company vehicle. I wrecked the company. Like there have been so many accidents on my poor dad's
Yeah, it's
company
brutal.
vehicle.
Definitely don't trust in cars. I remember when I was younger, I got a car and I said I'm never going to need another car again, and I was totally wrong.
That's cute.
Yeah.
I'm never going to need another.
This is all I'll ever want in life. We're also not wired that way. We want more stuff. I mean, that's
Right,
just the way that
it's
we are.
I got to upgrade.
But hopefully that helps a little bit. It's
Yeah.
where are you putting your dependence, or what are you trusting in to give you that sense of worth and acceptance and those kinds of things. And Jesus and a relationship with God is the only thing that I've found that doesn't let me down. Now, that doesn't mean that it's still not confusing. Sometimes he does stuff and I don't even know why or what, or things happen. He allows certain things to happen and I don't know why. It's just, but he does. And so it gives me great comfort that someone does and someone's in charge. And honestly, I'm glad it's not me because I just would totally muck it up. I don't have the ability to make altruist decisions or, I don't have the ability to act in perfect justice. Justice for me, basically, is I want justice for you, but I want grace for myself.
Yeah. Where have I heard that before? Is that just like a common thing people say?
I know.
Oh, man, it's so true.
But it is true.
It's so true.
Yep.
I want you guys, like, if you crossed me, if you did something wrong, there needs to be consequences.
Right.
And then...
Could you not give me those same consequences, though?
Right. I mean, that's definitely, like, I've made the mistake in my relationship with my husband. Love you, Sean. Sorry to bring you up so much. It's okay. I don't even know if he watches this or not. I can say whatever I want.
Sure.
But where, like, when we get into an argument, if I happen to be maybe not fully correct, I'm not going to say the W word.
Right.
But if something
sticks in your throat a little bit, I know.
It does. But if something's my fault, and I've apologized for it, I expect him to immediately accept my apology and move on because I said I was sorry. What else do you want? And like I've said those words, like, what else do you want me to say? I said I'm sorry. And I've been a stinker, and then the shoe will be on the other foot. And I'm like, Sean, but like I just really don't think you understand why like I will beat a dead horse if I want to make a point and he did something wrong. I'm like, well, it's not the first time, and like it's really, I'm not good about that sometimes.
Yeah, we all have our issues with those things.
Yeah.
But again, that's that perspective of if God has sort of got my back, it doesn't matter if anybody else does. And one of the beautiful things is if you understand who God is, even if you think something unjust or unfair is happening to you, God can still use it because he's in charge of that. So like you got a mean boss or something like that and you can't get along with them and you get blamed for something that you didn't even do or you lose your job or something. I believe so much in God's sovereignty and his plans that he can even use a wrong decision or what seems like a wrong decision to actually bless you and increase your knowledge of who he is. Crazy story in the Old Testament about Joseph kind of explains that. Joseph had a bunch of brothers and they were mean to him, threw him in a pit, he got sold off into slavery. It's a long story, I'm talking very quickly. But a lot of bad things happened to him. He got thrown into jail, being accused of adultery and messing with a governor's wife and those kinds of things. And so, but at the end of the story, he ends up being a ruler in Egypt, and he's able, through these years of going through these hardships to pile up enough food and corn and flour and those kinds of things that when 7 years of famine hit, he was able to feed and save lots of people. And at the end of it, it's this great scene where his brothers come in and they realize who he is, and they're afraid, because they did some terrible things to him. But he said, "Look, God, don't be afraid. God meant it for good. You meant it for evil, but God turned it into something good." And I just don't know any human beings like that that have the ability to do something, And so that's why I have faith in God and trust in Him that way.
Yeah. When I that school year 2 years ago, when I was on the fence as to whether to come here or not, to make this big move or not, it was one of the hardest years of teaching that I had. And I was in a position where one of my supervisors was just really tough. It was not a good mix, and there were things that happened that shouldn't have happened, that weren't necessarily my fault. And I remember being like, well, why is this, like, I'm in this impossible position. If I don't speak up, then this is a problem. I felt so antagonized. And if I was just looking at the situation, I would have, if I didn't have any perspective about God's planning, and I actually, to be honest though, I really didn't. I didn't see it at the time. I really couldn't. I couldn't see how God was going to use that for good. But it really did. Like, I loved teaching, and I love my coworkers and my kids, I call them, so much. I don't think I could have taken that break. I don't think I would have made that break from that job had I not been pushed to a point of just utter frustration.
Yeah.
And so, but I didn't see it at the time. It was hard. I was trying to be patient. I was trying to be the bigger person. But even in that, I was a little spiteful and prideful. And
well, you make a really good point, because sometimes we don't see what's going on in the midst of change, and that's pretty normal.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to go home and rejoice in God's sovereign plan that you got a boss that's mean to you, something's a little bit wrong with you. Like you're out of touch. I mean, I'm talking the ideal, and I'm talking the principle behind it.
Right.
But emotionally, when you're going through this stuff, you grieve, you mourn, you yell, you pull inside yourself and stop talking to people at all. We all respond differently to stress like that, and so give yourself a break. Change is hard, even really good change. I've got 4 grandkids living at my house right now. We're kind of bunkering down as a family and helping each other. And my daughter and son-in-law, it's a lot of fun. My 2 boys are there. They should be out in college and stuff like that, but they're back. Woo. No, that's more fun by faith. No, I love them. It's great to have them around. But even good things cause stress. Like, so the dynamic between 3 kids and 4 kids, which is...
Actually, I don't know.
Oh, that's true.
I've never had 3 kids.
You're right, because you had the twins, which is probably even worse. But
2 to 4, yeah.
When it just changes everything. Like, when they're all together, they're all good things. They're all blessings. But it's just this circus of yelling and stuff. But when you break them out individually, then it's a little bit more calm. I'm just saying that the blessing of even kids can be stressful and change oriented. So, again, that's why we have to just be so humble and ask for God's help in this, and ask for discernment. Another thing you mentioned real quickly, your women's group that you meet with, the group of women. Again, I can't tell you enough to somehow find some friends that have the same Christian values that you have, and ask them when you're going through change, or when you're going to initiate a change. Because sometimes we just don't see it until we verbalize it and we talk it through with someone else, or somebody else might see through kind of, hey, you run away, you shouldn't do that, you need to stay, or whatever. I mean, so it's you can't get perfect discernment on your own. You need people.
Yeah, no, you're right. I was thinking about the biggest change in my life was, like you said, going from 2 kids to 4 kids. Sean and I just had Elizabeth in August of 2000. I always forget. 14, yeah, math. Yep. And we were going through a really hard time in our marriage. It was just like, and then having a newborn was just put us right over the top. So we went through a period of separation right after we had Elizabeth, and we were going to counseling, and we were trying, but things were just tough. And then on a 2-week trial of like, okay, we're moving back. I moved back into the house. We were in a good spot, but things were still kind of delicate. Well, I got pregnant again. So 3 months after we had Elizabeth, surprise! And that, so I mean, like, just finding out I was pregnant, and the half of the pregnancy, it was just like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? I actually had a Honda, is it Element? The one that looks like a toaster?
Oh, yeah. I've seen those, yeah.
I loved that car. Everybody made fun of it. I loved that car.
It's like a box.
It's like a box.
Yeah.
We called it the toaster. I love that car, but it only seats 4 people. You know, like, so even then I'm like, how am I going to make this work? How am I going to make this work? I bought like a wicked cheap minivan. And then halfway through that pregnancy, we went to the ultrasound. For those of you who personally know me, you guys know what I'm about to share. So I invited my sister Kelly to go to the ultrasound when we were going to find out if our baby was a boy or a girl. And then it turns out they were twins. And so then and the whole, up to that point too, Derek, I just kept asking them. Every time I had like a sonogram, I was like, it's just one, right? It's just one, right? And because I just was like, I remember them saying, well, do twins run in your family? And I'm like, no, but that would be the worst case scenario right now. Because I was so petrified of like, you know, our marriage was back together, but delicate. And we're about to, we have a newborn that doesn't sleep through the night. And then now we're going to have another baby. And anyways, we found out we were having twins. And my sister Kelly had this crazy reaction and it ended up being a viral video and everything like that. But if you go back and watch her reaction, she immediately was filled with faith and joy for me and Sean, because she's a really strong woman of faith, and she drives me nuts sometimes. But she has this crazy reaction where she's like, "Oh my God, can I have one? Can I have a baby?" And like freaking out. And she's like, "I'm so jealous. I'm so happy." And she was freaking out. And when we got off camera, she's like, "You know, Jill, like God just has such big plans for you and Sean. And like, see, you're gonna work it out. You're gonna work it out." And I was panicking. I mean, my first reaction to finding out there were twins was not as holy, because it was so scary. Yeah. But I mean, look at my little buddies. You know, they're 5 years old now. You know, my kids are the best thing ever. You know, but that change was legitimately hard. But I think the twins is what truly saved our marriage. Like, God used that major change to force me and Sean to communicate, because we had to. There was no way we could have gotten through it. And there was no option of separation or divorce. You know, like, I think in my mind I always, you know, my parents got divorced, so if I need to get divorced, and you know, that's going to be fine. God will forgive. Like, you know, all those thoughts that, if people are really honest, go through your mind sometime. And but it really did put us in a position where God truly knew what we needed, and I'm so thankful for it. But it was scary, but I was really grateful my sister was there for that, because she recognized it as God, and she spoke into it so frequently that God's bringing you together. See, God's taking care of you, and it gave me strength, and it helped me to hear that. You know,
we need to be willing to do those things for each other. Sometimes my faith might wander a little bit or diminish, but someone else's faith kind of picks me up. You know, and if they believe, and then all of a sudden I come to my senses and I remember how faithful God's been in the past. I always sort of forget that. Like, He does these wonderful, magical things in the past, and then it's sort of like, what have you done for me lately, God? You know, you can't handle this probably. So but we gotta remind each other of those things. And I just wanted to share real quick too, my living situation now. I don't want anybody really feeling bad for me, because I'm blessed beyond belief to be able to spend time with my grandkids. I'm not saying it's easy, but you know who it's really hard on, though, I feel like, is Peter and Kenzie. So can you imagine living in your parents' home, having your whole marriage and how you parent kids and everything on display?
Nope.
They were fighting the other day, and I was like, I just want to go hide somewhere. Like, but then the other side of me was like, I should intervene. And I've always root for my daughter. Peter, you must be wrong. You know what I mean? And I'm like,
don't be one of those in-laws.
Yeah, so I just went out and prayed and took a walk and then came back in. But again, though, our willingness to change has led to so many blessings. Little Claire, the other day, she's 9 months old. She started walking. she can only take 4 or 5 different steps, but I got to see her do that, and man, I wouldn't trade that for anything. But it takes a lot, and you don't always experience that in the moment. But you got to be patient, and God will speak to you and help you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
And I remember when you told staff that they were going to be moving in with you, and I feel like I've reminded you a few times. I'm like, you were at the beginning of this job, like a year ago, you were feeling the empty nester thing. You were sad and lonely.
I was. I had 3 months, 3 months of an empty nest.
And you would see my kids, and you would like practically get choked up.
I would. It was hard, and I probably should have throttled back on that a little bit because I didn't want a house of 10, which I have now. That's like the opposite of an empty nest. But yeah, I was sad. The house was quiet. I was rattling around at home at night. Julie'd be off doing something, and I'd be sitting there. I guess I'll watch TV or whatever. I mean, it was just it was just a totally different surprise, about how that would be. I thought it would be great, and you know what? It will be great one day, and it does have some really, really good things. But I don't know. I love my kids. I love my grandkids. It's been fun.
And I remember talking to Kenzie. We had a really awesome heart-to-heart right at the beginning of the quarantine. We were out in the back of the church. I think I drove around back so I could eat my Chipotle by myself at a picnic table, and she was there. We ended up having this great conversation, and I don't think that she was even thinking about moving in. I don't think you guys had started that conversation yet. And she was in a spot, she was really feeling she was missing you guys. And I remember your little grandkids running over to the glass door and wanting to hug you and give you love, and it broke my heart to see that, because just because they were quarantining from their grandparents, and it just broke my heart. So I remember when you told the staff, and everybody was like, okay, all right, no, that's great that you're going to do that for Peter and Kenzie. And I was like, I was so happy. I was so happy. And because I mean, of course, that's like a huge loss as a person to give up your freedom, like in Kenzie and Peter's role, and like to not have your own place. Like that's a huge, potentially depressing situation. But I don't know. I was just holding on to that moment where she was like, really, really needing her mom and dad.
Yeah.
And needing to be close to you guys, and so, but it's good to be reminded of those things when things are tougher.
Yeah, I think things used to be more like this, where families like living near each other. Like my great grandmother and grandfather, and then my aunt and uncle, they all lived around the same block in Kansas City growing up and stuff. And so, I think we used to be more sort of, let's move in together, let's help out, let's be a family, but we're so fiercely independent these days, and we're so mobile, and a lot of times we don't even really live around our parents, and I think this time has reminded us how much we need each other, and we shouldn't be afraid to do that,
Yeah. All
right. Change can be a good thing. It can be a frustrating thing, it can be a confusing thing, but God uses it all to really help us, and his motives are always pure. He doesn't, like I had this image again, he's not mad at me, he's not rooting for me to fail. He's not waiting for that moment to say, I told you so. It's more of, can you just trust me, and I'll help you, and we'll get through life together.
Yeah.
He really is rooting for us.
Yeah, I agree.
So how are we doing? Did people make any comments or anything? Or?
You know what? The comment section has been quiet, but the viewers are astounding. We've got a lot of viewers. So if you're watching this on my personal Facebook page, this is the first time I'm posting it there. Usually, Derek and I will be live every Thursday at noon, and we've contemplated switching that time around. I think I'll put out a survey before we make any changes.
Sure.
To see if there's a better time. But yeah, so we'll come to you once a week, and even though I'm stepping down as my role, this is still on my heart, and I just really enjoy it. What did you say your son Caleb was talking about?
Oh yeah, he was saying you and Jillian must really love to talk about stuff, because he was thinking about live stream, being in front of a camera for an hour. Like, what do you say? He's a great kid, but he's just real quiet and stuff. He was funny.
Well, it gives us a good time to catch up, but with a purpose,
right.
And not just, whatever.
Yep, I enjoy it.
Elise told us God's got great things in store, and I agree with you. He does. So yeah, we'll be back with you guys next week.
Yeah.
And if people are watching this on the playback and you've made it all the way to, how many minutes are we? Like 54 minutes. Congratulations.
You survived.
If you comment with the word banana, then we know you've made it this far and you get bonus points.
Sure, that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, bonus points. Do we have like a Chapel Lacrosse t-shirt, or we have Frisbees?
Yeah, we do. We can give you a Frisbee.
All right, if you comment with the word banana,
We'll send you a Frisbee.
we'll send you a Frisbee.
The postage is probably worth more than the Frisbee, but we'll send it to you, though.
You know what? You can pick it up. We're at 160 Flanders in Westboro. Awesome.
Well, thanks for joining us today, and we appreciate you. Don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything or if you want prayer or anything like that, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next week, okay?
Wait. We've already...
Do we have bananas coming in?
Yeah. So Debbie, I didn't know you were watching, but now I do. Debbie and Elise both commented banana.
Sweet.
We got to tell Josh to order some more Frisbees.
Yeah.
Chapel Lacrosse Frisbees.
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys, and thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.